Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The DEAN Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The DEAN Talks starts now.
Welcome to everyone who is in here. Kellyanne is one of our speakers. Hi, we see you in the audience. So welcome to the Love edition of the DEAN Talks. Today, we're going to talk about relationships and commitment for diverse minds. All right, we want to start out by saying you are deserving of love for the diagnosed, for the creative, the emotional, the oppressed, for the aging individual. There's a lot of intrigue around, how to conduct ourselves in other environments and inside of relationships. So there's memes about singlehood stats for autistic individuals or Asperger's individuals. There's divorce rates among ADHD individuals that we consider, and really just like shelf life for relationships of the poor. If you've looked at the census, they have a lot of stats on that. So we're here to talk about relationships so we can discuss lovableness for the depressed and how can we explore trends in diversity of the ways that we think and act and those impacts on our relationships of all types. So I need to say the views expressed here are not necessarily reflective of the views of hosts and sponsors of Ripe Fruit Creative. The information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice, and that the session is being recorded. All right, so I'm going to start off with a short video. We have an interview that was done with a local business owner who has done a lot of amazing work. So let's get that video loaded up.
There's different type of people. You got your introverts and your extroverts. I consider myself an extrovert, so if I was in that type of space, neurodivergent, maybe I'm in that space because I'm a different type of individual. I find spaces that attract me. So even dealing in this black vegan space, there's a lot of black vegan safe spaces because the overall vegan mainstream may not be safe to us black vegans in terms of the way we think, how we want to go about our advocacy. So we're dealing with the topic of neurodivergence. That may be the same thing.
This is the Food Rescue Baltimore team. They come out here to land of Kush every Monday from 4 to 5. And they have some rescue produce that is just thrown away sometimes. Like, you can still use this produce.
Are there groups out there, social groups? We connect globally now. So if you want to go global with it, I think Googling something, starting something on your own. There are groups that have been started by that individual in search of individuals that are sharing that same space.
You want to check them out at Black People Ride Bikes. I have the founders here. You want to tell us about what's going on with Black People Ride Bikes?
Hello, my name is Nia. I am one of the co-founders of Black People Ride Bikes. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization that promotes cycling within the Black diaspora.
Why? Why do you promote cycling within the Black diaspora? Why?
Because we need to know how to do it safely, and we also need cycling as a way to stay healthy, stay fit.
So that's how I would approach it, from just dealing and negotiating my environment and working through my life as it is now. Make the space if there's no space. That's how a lot of the projects started here, Vegan Soul Fest for Black vegans that wanted to go to veg fests that were more comfortable for them. Maryland Vegan Restaurant Month, because I want to go to restaurants that have more plant-based options on the menu. Creating that space for you and making it your own and more comfortable, and that will attract the tribe that you're looking for.
Well, I am a vegan and I love to eat healthy. I've been vegetarian since I was 14. Now I turned vegan 3 years ago. And for me, it gives me a lot of energy. And it helps me with my yoga practice.
Everyone I don't care, what you're categorized as or how you're categorized, you're going to be looking for that. So tribes, I think tribal, everyone is in their own tribe. I'm in my own tribe. So if you're thinking about neurodiversity, it's the same thing. Like people usually attract like people. I always like to work with people on their authentic self. Don't put on the show for me. Like, so you just mentioned what normal is for some households that may do this or may do that. I joke about this with my husband all the time. I call him middle class and I'm lower class because I come from the projects and all of that. Oh, we're going to sit at the dinner table. We weren't doing all that. It was totally different. I was eating cereal on my bed. But I think you need to embrace the individual for their whole self and that whole being, who that person really is, because that's all they can be is them. You need to appreciate them for them. About normal to who, depending on what definition you're using of normal. My definition of normal can be different from yours, and different ethnicities, races, values in terms of religions and beliefs. It's about negotiating your environment, so that environment of the individual, or just being accepting of that. Being accepting of different personalities, different perspectives, different behaviors, and this whole normal ideology of things, I don't understand it. I'm taking the person as their whole self and just understanding them and their behaviors through them.
All right. Forgive us for giving you a video, but hopefully that helps provide some viewpoint and perspective on the topic as we continue to unfold. So let's see. I'm going to start out by acknowledging this wonderful, illustrious panel that we have with us today. All these wonderful minds together in one room to talk about relationships. I'm going to start with Nomita. Nomita, would you like to tell us a little bit about your work?
Hi, I'm Nomita Advani. I'm a licensed art therapist, and currently for the last 7 years, I'm working in a clinical practice with children, adolescents, and adults. And prior to that, I was in education. I worked in a school, K-12 school for kids with learning disabilities, and I also ran the K-12 art program.
Awesome. Lovely to have you. Love all of your wonderful experiences from art therapist world and imaginative thinking, I think, perspective that you bring. All right. Then next, we're going to go to Tanasia Hazelton. Tanasia, can you tell us a little bit about you and your experiences?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm a master social worker who specializes in organizational leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been in social work for 9 years, and I've worked on the clinical side, but I've also worked on the side where we more so address social challenges from a systemic lens, so organizational capacity building as well as policy work. And I'm also a neurodivergent person. I have ADHD, and I'm also diagnosed with bipolar 1. I'm also the founder of Infinitely Impactful Solutions, where I do consulting essentially.
Awesome. I was just going to say, and she's a founder too. So lovely to have you. Wonderful. Always wonderful to have your perspective. And then you always help keep us honest. And then live from Spain, we have Dr. Silvia Lopez Larrosa here. Doctor, would you like to tell us a little bit, Silvia, about the work that you've been up to?
Yes, I come from Spain, and I'm an associate professor in the University of La Coruña in Spain, in the northwest of Spain. And I'm a psychologist. I work in the psychology department. And we have been working with families and children with learning disabilities. We developed a program that addresses the social-emotional needs of children and families together in several sessions. And we have also done some other work with multiple family groups, with people with chronic illness. And this is part of what I have done.
Awesome. So lovely to have you. I'm excited about the work that you've done. You also have a book, and hopefully you'll tell us more about that as you go along. So, as we consider all of the things that affect and impact the lives of someone who may think differently, and I have a definition of neurodiversity I'm going to put in the chat, but that's people who think out of the box, our innovators, those people who may have a diagnosis and everything in between. There are real concerns that folks have about adjusting to life and finding work. Some people even believe that maybe they are less likely to seek out relationships. So let's talk about it. Do neurodivergent people love differently? I'm going to start out with Nomita. Nomita, what do you think?
So, it's such a huge topic and every individual is so different. So when we're talking about relationship and trying to bring all that together, I've tried to kind of observe it from my work. So when I think about the clients that come to me and are looking to work through relationship issues, whether it's a parent and a child, whether it's a intimate partner couple or a married couple, spouses, what I've realized is, first of all, the fact that they've come into therapy shows a commitment that they want to do something. They want to make it work. They want to have this be successful. And even though, I have a husband on the spectrum with sort of a neurotypical wife, or I have a parent who's neurotypical with the child who may have ADHD, and the other parent may also have ADHD, or I have spouses where one has ADHD and one is on the spectrum. So it's so complex, and there's so much to sort of try to piece together. And certainly the goals I put together is based on who's come in the room and what they need and what they're trying to do. But what I've realized is, and what I came to find out is, there is some one underlying thing that I have been able to piece together if I'm looking at it just globally and largely. And that is, no matter what everyone's bringing and what everybody wants, the commonalities that everybody has the same need for love, attention, validation. And so I try to start there, because how do you bring these very divergent sort of people and needs and expectations and all of that? Where do you start? How do you bring it together? And so I usually will start there, because to me, the fact that you came in means that you recognize that, even if you don't consciously recognize it, it's something that's underlying. So I tend to use that as my starting point for me also to feel sort of motivated to work and figure all of this out, is that sort of common universal need that we all have for love and attention and validation.
Love that. I definitely captured that love, attention, and validation. So we're all seeking out those needs. Tanasia, Silvia, tell us a little bit about this. Are we approaching it differently? Is there something different about a neurodivergent person, a uniquely minded person seeking out love?
There is no such thing as no more in love. For one, I will say. I'll also say that there are, everybody is neurodivergent. I mean, everybody does experience neurodiversity. All of our minds are different. But when we come to talk about neurodivergent diagnoses and challenges such as autism, ADHD, bipolar, depression, things that affect us neurologically in the brain, there are challenges that play into our everyday lives as neurodiverse people that affect your relationships. A person's perceptions of time being a challenge, a person's memory being challenged, especially if they have ADHD, a person whose interests and emotions may wax and wane more than a neurotypical person's emotions may wane. All of these can be it can be scathing to a relationship, to be honest. It can be challenging to think that you will find somebody who's willing to sort of put up with the challenges that come with whatever your particular brand of neurodiversity is. And so I will say that there are differences in loving as a neurodivergent person, and also in being in loving and being loved as a neurodivergent person, but we're all still worthy.
I think that's very interesting that we are talking about that every one of us is different because our brains are different, but at the same time, there are many commonalities like mattering to other people and feeling that there is somebody that cares about you. That's something like Nomita said, probably not the same words, but the meaning that we all need people that cares about us, and to people that to whom we matter and mattering to other people. And probably it's not exactly love, but you are in the minds of other people, that they are paying attention to you. And I think that it's how we balance all the diversity, like we talked before about the cultural diversity in showing affections and all this, but at the same time, probably everywhere, no matter where the country you are or how diverse your mind is to the others, is that you need that other people cares about you, and probably you need also to care about other people. If not, you are going to become there's no balance between mattering to other people and how much the others matter to you. So I think that this is like in many things, it's about balance between differences and what makes us similar, no matter where you are. Yes, very interesting, really.
Also, when we talk about neurodivergence, we tend to think about the seemingly negative or more challenging traits, a lot of which I mentioned before. But I love the term neurospicy that some people have started using, which means that different, but not necessarily negative. There are also a lot of positive sides to having autism or having ADHD, a lot that you can learn from being bipolar or being depressed, and bring to a relationship that can also be fruitful and edifying, and that can teach that other person and help that other person evolve as they deal with someone who has a neurospicy mind.
I love that, neurospicy. And you spoke earlier about people whose emotions may be all over the place, or their memory. Is that recognized as love, I wonder? We're talking about, do they love differently? Someone would say that's not love, but it is, right? What is that about? I guess we try and define it as well. Okay, so then we start to go into this kind of line of thinking that relationships then are different under this paradigm of normal. If we're thinking normal and other, then relationships can be kind of difficult in that space. Maybe that's part of the problem, that we're trying to do that in the first place. So, it exists. The term normal exists. We have ideas about what we think normal looks like and how it is. Do we encourage normal in diverse and creative minds? Of course, I automatically think of the kids and young people. Like, do we encourage that, or do we try to create something new and allow them room to grow and shape and be who they are? Let's start out with Nomita. Again, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that first, maybe.
Yes, I think what's normal for one person is only what you're bringing to the table from what you learned, for what was modeled for you, what your narratives you collected along the way, particularly from your childhood, and from what you saw and what was reflected back to you. You learn how to be a relational person from your caregivers, who are showing you who you are based on how they respond to you. And, that's where you kind of collect the information. And then when you go out into the world, that's what you think is normal, in addition to what you've picked up, from society. And so it's very important to recognize that when you come in, you have to actually see the person, whoever that is, whether you've become a parent and you're trying to see your child, whether you're in an intimate partner relationship and you're trying to start your own adult intimate partner relationship and sort of long-term goals with that. You really need to realize that you have to see the other person and not just only bring your expectations and needs, and recognizing that you're actually engaging in a relationship with everything that they are, culturally, their race, their neurodivergence, everything. And so you have to be able to see all of that in order to know what you're engaging with, and kind of check your expectations at the door and your needs to see what's realistic and what fits and what works. And that's kind of the work of that relationship, that's doing the work. So, yeah.
One of the first rules for rewriting rules is acknowledging that there are rules. And so being honest about the fact that you do have a certain set of expectations and norms in mind when you come into a relationship, or when you deal with relationships with other people, knowing what those are for yourself, and then also being really vocal and honest with the person about what those norms are, and working to build relationships from the ground up, whether that is you're just meeting a partner in romantic love, or whether that is revisiting your relationship with your mom. What are the norms that we're bringing to the table that are either working for or against us in our relationship?
We talk about Nomita said about the what we bring to the relationship, and thinking about our needs and the needs of the other person when we have a relationship. And we've talked about that we bring our ideas from the family of origin, and we've been talking about the fact that you are yourself, but when you meet somebody, this person changes you and you change the other person too. So I think that there's an exchange between, so any relationship that you have with other people is different, even when you are more or less the same. So we build different relationships, and it's not only because you may have different roles in the relationships, but also because the other person is different too. So we change. So that's why I think it's so difficult to think about normal relationships, because the scope is huge, because there's it's a huge variety of people that we meet along the way. And so it depends on, the interaction between the people. And also we can talk again about the culture and all these things that in every culture is different. Like in what is a normal relationship here, it may be different from sort of normal relationship in another country. So there's lots of possible varieties that depend on the culture, and also on each person relating with other other people. So it is very difficult to think about. I try to think in normality as a very broad scope, because if we have a narrow image of what's normal, we wouldn't be able to fit. Nobody would fit, really. So I think that we should open, and probably in some cultures the scope is narrow, and in other cultures is less narrow. Probably in a very multicultural country it's more open, and in another one is less open. But it should, there should be variety inside the label of normality, because we are very different.
That's so true. I love that. Let's look at how narrow or broad that definition of normal is. So now we have another video actually to share, to just continue to broaden our minds in the conversation. So let's give a second while we get that loaded.
A lot of stories that I have within my dating experience where I was either dumped or chastised or things ended because I had difficulty reciprocating emotion in a way that was recognizable to the other person. And once I was diagnosed with autism, everything started clicking and making sense. So this term of relationship accommodations came out of my bad experiences dating, where I needed help essentially bridging the gap so the other person could recognize what I was trying to do in terms of meeting their needs.
A lot of us try to explain our needs harder or expect the person to try to meet them harder. And we know at work and at school that doesn't work. It's usually not about lack of effort. In the rare cases where it is about lack of effort, it's because somebody's gotten frustrated and given up. But for the most part, there is some sort of impairment that's happening that's getting in the way.
That gives us some scope to continue. So then let's talk then about when we think about family relationships, because maybe we've been focused a lot on couples and marriages and things like that. But when we think about family relationships specifically and friendships, where there's a lot of unspoken expectations, a lot of assumed norms here, For people that are from a unique mindset, all the way to experiencing neurodivergence, as Tanasia referred to it earlier, all the way to diagnosed with a known diversity, mental diversity. How can we find relatability and commonality without masking normal? So let me lead off with Tanasia on that one.
I first want to define masking as suppressing neurodivergent traits. So a person with autistic traits may try to suppress their special interests, for example, or a person who has ADHD may try to suppress their memory challenges or time blindness, for example, or even certain physical tics. A person may try to mask in order to fit into society and to pass in society. And when you think about passing in society, you may connect that to also how Black people have had to pass in society. What happens if a person is Black and autistic, or a person is Black and has ADHD, or a person is Black and has depression? We have this compound masking that happens, and it's really a survival tactic to be able to pass in society. But we are having talks like this and being open in the ways that we are in order to create a society where people would have to mask less or don't have to mask at all and can be their neurodivergent selves, just generally, without having to mask to survive. So that's the definition of masking that I would give. And I would say that a way that we can help people not have to mask is by having honest conversations and also meeting each other with acceptance and cooperation. I love how that video talked about relationship accommodations. Me as a person with ADHD, it's very hard for me to gauge time, honestly. I'm always late. Time isn't a concept in my mind. It's very hard for me to gauge. Even I'll feel like I've been doing something for 2 hours and I've been doing it for 4, for example. And so one relationship accommodation that I have with my mother, who has more neurotypical traits than I do, is whenever we're on vacation together, for example, she's the timekeeper. And instead of getting frustrated with me that I'm moving too slow or moving too fast during or not being aware, completely unaware of the timing, she tries to keep us on track timing wise. And so relationship accommodations is one way that we can help people not have to mask.
I would like to say in the Unique Minds program that we've been running with children with learning disabilities and their families, we had lots of variety between parents and children. And we had, I remember very much a mother who was so much involved with the child that other family members disappeared. So I think that when we are talking about the family and when there is something that has learning disabilities, like in this case, there's lots of also variety inside the families. And I found that mother who was so much involved that I say everything, the husband and the other child didn't exist. So it was so they were only the two of them. I also found some parents who had lots of difficulties accepting that child had learning disabilities. I remember these parents, they were mathematicians and their child, a girl, had problems with math. So, it was so strange for them to accept, so difficult for them to accept that their child was like this. So when we are talking about masking, and you said, Tanisha, about accepting. I remember those parents that they had a hard time to accept it, because I think that in America you use learning disabilities for children who have handicaps but in Spain it is learning disabilities that you have problems with maths and reading or writing. So these children, the parents are very confused because there's no cue you don't have any cue and until they go to school and you see that they can't learn to read, and they have lots of problems identifying words and all this. And I remember that I had in one of the videos that we showed to the families in the program, there's a man who is a journalist, and he had lots of problems when he was at school with writing and reading. So he developed a skill. So when they asked him to say a word and it had all the letters that he wasn't good at, he used a synonym. So he was very skilled in thinking about another word, that didn't have the letters. So again, talking about masking, in this case, he was masking his difficulties, but at the same time, he was developing a new skill, and now he's a journalist. So that's why we show this video to these parents, because sometimes when you are a parent and your child has difficulties, you don't see the light. You don't see where this child is going to be, what's going to happen. It's the future that they worry a lot. And you show this video clip of this man saying all the difficulties he had at school, and now he's a journalist, and how he developed all these skills. So they see, they really see the light. They see, my child has a future, which is something that worries parents a lot when their child has any difficulty, what's going to happen to them. So if you may mask or not mask, but all parents think about the future and what's going to happen to them. And so, there are lots of ideas I have been saying about the family, but all this comes from this experience with the families with children with learning disabilities in this Unique Mind program. And we really learned a lot about, because you if as a professional, you try to identify with them and see things from their own perspective, and it's very and we also do the same to them. For instance, one of the activities we have in the Unique Minds program is that we make parents, we put the parents in a task that's very hard for them to do, and it's similar to the experience that their children have at the school, having lots of difficulties like writing, for instance. We make parents, we read to them words, and we say to them that they have to write with if they use their right hand, they have to write with the left hand. So it's very hard for them. So they can't write, and we ask them. This is the first session, and do you think this is similar to what your child's experiences at school? And that's when they realize they really are in the shoes of their children at school, and they really understand. So it has to do, it has a lot to do with being in the shoes of your child or your. So it's and we also as professionals try to be in the shoes of the parents and the children at the same time, so we understand with what their experiences are and their difficulties and how we can overcome that.
And that has to be difficult to do, but I think that's a wonderful example of relationship accommodation. Nomita, do you have some in your practice that you do?
Yeah, in fact, actually, when Silvia was saying, how there's one child that has a need and another child that is probably assumed to be more neurotypical, and that child takes up all the attention, and so the masking that this other child has to do to act like they're okay and kind of left to their own devices to kind of manage. I've had that, as an example in where I've had a child spend years sort of masking until she finally had to come into therapy, and she finally wasn't able to manage anymore. And her biggest concern was that she was now burdening, also going to be burdening her parent. And she thought she wasn't like her sibling. And, so there was it became very complicated. So when Silvia was mentioning that kind of came to mind. And How do you help parents support all the children, and what a child takes on, when they're sort of in that environment. And also, to Tanasia's point of communication being really, really at the core of how we can all get through so many things. If you're really able to both communicate and then listen and understand, and in the shoes of, really have that empathy for what is this person saying, what does this person need, and if there's love, then you want something to change, you want to be able to help. It's just that sometimes people just don't know how or what they're supposed to be doing. And so kind of getting rid of all those layers of complication can be through communication. So I had a young man on the autism spectrum who chose to come into session because he really wanted to work through his relationship, and his girlfriend was neurotypical, and he wanted scripts of how do I understand nonverbal communication, how do I just read her emotions. And she had to understand that she had to actually articulate, verbalize her emotions. She couldn't just sit and show something non-verbally, because that would, and for her to sort of make that change, and for him to feel like he could have some scripts where he understands what everything means. So that communication is so vitally important. And again, going back to, if you come in with the love, and you come in with the commitment and the intention, then the work there are ways. We just have to, there are ways that we can find, there are paths that we can find, but that initial intention and that core and that foundation is the love. That's where you kind of have to begin, and then you can always seek out ways, or find the supports that you need.
When we talk about masking, I think about how being a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world can feel like being on a stage, because you stand out. If you're a person who experiences emotional lability, where your emotions, you can be happy one minute and all of a sudden your emotion and your energy drops, and you're suddenly experiencing symptoms of depression, etc., without any external stimuli. If you have bipolar, if you have depression, if you have ADHD, sometimes if you have autism and you're experiencing burnout, it can be hard to feel like you're on a stage. But people notice when your energy changes, when your emotions change. And so people cope in different ways with neurodivergence, and respecting how people cope with neurodivergence is a way that we can decrease people's need to mask. A person who is going through that emotional lability that I spoke about may need some time alone, some time off of the stage, to handle their own emotions. A person, some people take medication. I remember one way that I mastered, I hid medication. Some of my family still doesn't know, maybe they'll know now, that I take medication for bipolar and ADHD. And I remember going on a vacation right after I was diagnosed and prescribed medication for ADHD, after struggling through university and struggling through my jobs, etc. I'm even masking now, trying to validate why I'm taking medication, talking about struggling through these different, but I had to hide the medication from my mother. But if different people were more respectful of and more understanding of the different ways that neurodivergent people may cope, it can definitely decrease the need to mask.
That's major. I think trust, I'll just throw in that I think trust, you have to trust that if this person's doing a lot of different things, it doesn't have anything to do with your connection with them. Nothing can affect that. So two things I practice, sometimes I can't word the emotion, but I will say I'm feeling emotions. And sometimes that's just an opening for vulnerability. And I practice this, is our air clear? And some things have to go what I call on the wall, which means we need to write it down. And that's not a topic we can broach right now. I feel like just those small pieces sometimes can help. So we have one more short video to show. I know we're coming up on the last few minutes, but it's 1 minute. Let's see how that can add to the conversation and get to our last question.
Development researcher by the name of Nathan Fox, who's out of the University of Maryland. He studied the impact of social isolation on children who were placed in orphanages in Romania. He utilized MRIs to study their brain structure and EEG to study the brain activity. And what his research showed is that the infants who were institutionalized and did not have the opportunity to develop social connections, they experienced a negative impact to their brain structure and to their brain function. As a matter of fact, what was disturbing is that any time spent in an institution resulted in a decrease in brain cells for those children. So what made the difference? Social connection.
Okay, so she brought into the conversation social connection, and this is such a great conversation. So let's get to this last question. Now that we realize the impact of social connection and we think about all these different tools that people can bring, what would you say to the diverse or creative mind, someone experiencing neurodivergence, trying to navigate the complex space of relationships? As well, how can families and spouses navigate in that space with them? So the question is just how can we all find a place to stand amongst all of the negotiation and reflection and evolution? So what's your advice to people in relationships, to make it simple? I'll start out with Silvia. What do you think?
I'm not very good at giving advices because, we really, this is not pret-a-porter. You really need a suit that is just for you. So I prefer to talk with everybody, with the people, and see what their goals are, and try to create a suit for them instead of giving a pre-packed advice. But talking about the relationships and how to relate with other people, in my experience, when I was working with people and talking with people that, for instance, that they had a brain injury, I have seen people that was able to see even though it's hard and it's difficult and you don't want that your couple has a brain stroke, they could see the positive, the assets, everything that you can take that's positive. And I think that probably is not a very good advice, but it is something that we as humans need. I'm not talking about being not very too positive, that you go to the other side, everything is fine. No. I'm saying about even in the worst situation, you can see there is still like hope and things that you can, okay, we have this. What can we do with this? And what can come that's positive from this? This would be my, my idea. I think that's something that has to do with your own disposition in life, that you try to be positive, not too positive, but just to identify what's good and what can be a source, a resource for you to overcome any situation. Because we also know people that just even when they are in a good, objectively a good situation, they are always complaining and thinking, oh, everything is horrible. And you say, you don't see how everything is horrible. But there's some people that it's like this, very lean to the negative, and I am saying, please lean to the most positive and try to see the resources, identify the resources. And I think that as professionals, probably Nomita and Tanasia, that's what they do when they are working with the people they work. What do they have, and what we can take that's their strengths, so yes, pull them and leave them so they will be better. So I think that this would be my idea. But as I said, the best advice is the one that you make just for the person or the family. Or
I love that. You need a suit that's just for you. Naijah?
I love the idea of being strengths-based. It's so funny that you said that because that's like the tagline for social work. I'm Monica, so you hit it on the head, Silvia. That is very central to my work, and is very central in all relationships. And I think should be very central to what we might be saying to someone who is neurodivergent and who's seeking to date, or who's neurodivergent and seeking to work through challenges with their family who doesn't understand, is identifying that there are also a lot of strengths and beauty that come with having some sort of neurodivergence or diagnosis. And those things can edify not only you as an individual or the other person as an individual, but your relationship. Also, just knowing that you're worthy. No sort of diagnosis makes you unworthy of love, even when it can feel like it, even when your experiences may have said that in the past, even though somebody may have made you feel hard to love, even if it was your own parent that makes you feel hard to love, you're still worthy of love, and love is still important in your life, and not something to be downplayed. We just now saw that wonderful video about the importance of social interaction and love. And so I would say keep going, keep trying in your relationships with your family, keep trying in dating if that's something that you're interested in, and keep trying in your relationship with yourself. Keep remembering your worthiness in your relationship with yourself as you're working through different forms of neurodiversity and different diagnoses.
Yeah, I think also, when you feel different, really remembering that you're not alone. It's just absolutely not possible. There's many, many people who are feeling that way, and everyone's in their little corners and not realizing that. So really finding that supportive network, because even if you're a parent trying to raise a child who's neurodivergent, there are other parents doing that. There are other parents who are feeling similar. There are children who are feeling similar, being parented, feeling different. All of that, there's always a supportive network, a network that does understand and empathize with what you are going through. And finding that network and using that network, because even for a parent, it's exhausting to raise a child who's different. It's exhausting for the child to keep feeling different. You're not alone. You don't have to be always thinking that you have to do everything by yourself. Or if you're in a relationship, not asking a person to be everything to you. This knight in shining armor, all these myths we have that just because you have an intimate partner, they're now for the rest of their life supposed to provide your every need, your every romantic need, your every emotional need, your every need, and go everywhere with you and love all your friends. And, it's just too much. So really sort of creating a supportive network, finding a network that sort of spreads that a little bit. So no one person is carrying all of it by themselves and having to do that, and feeling, that they're the only ones who are going through this and having to hide it, or, all of those things that happen to us when we feel different. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to make sure you find your supportive network. Ask that of the people you are with. Make sure they're finding their supportive network. So you're coming together where you can, and you're also spreading sort of some of that supportiveness through your mentors, your friends, your family, your therapist, whoever can support, make that village, make that network. So I think that's really important as well.
I totally agree with you, Nogmita. It's a great idea, because we normally feel very lonely when we have problems, and we don't share our problems, and we think it's only ours, and it's lots of people has the same or sort of the same, and it's very important to have a network that can support us.
So as we're talking in the same vein of talking about supportive networks, there are many support groups for people who are neurodivergent, whether you're autistic, you have ADHD, you're bipolar or depression, etc. And I'll put a couple in the chat, but Attention Deficit Disorder Association is one. There's one called ADHD Babes. that I particularly love. There are many support groups. You don't have to just, your support group, your support network doesn't just have to be the people in your personal life. You can also find great support systems in strangers and support groups, to be honest. So that's one thing that I would say to seek out if you are a neurodivergent person, if you are, or a person who has specific diagnosis. And even if you don't feel like you're having challenges, just for community, that video earlier talked about having a neurodivergent tribe. You can build your tribe very intentionally through support groups. So that would be some of my advice to a neurodivergent person.
One of my students, she collected data with siblings of adults with special needs, and it was a powerful experience. There were all these young adults talking about the experience of having siblings with special needs, and after that session, we wanted to know what it was to live with a sibling with special needs. And after the session, they said, why don't we meet again? They wanted, talking about a network. They shared that they had a sibling with special needs, and they normally feel very lonely, as Namita said. And it was great for them. They wanted to meet again because we need to share what we, and it can be something very informal, and it was sort of informal, but it worked for them. It was helpful.
Absolutely. And some of us were strangers before we came to Dean Talks, and now we are family. So I want to thank all of these wonderful speakers that joined us today. I'm putting their contact information in the chat. If you would like to reach out, you have questions on something they said, I want to give them the opportunity to tell us what they're up to. If there's anything that we can support you or be involved with, as we are now each other's community, please, let's take this moment to allow you to do that. Any books, any links, any things, work that you got going on that you'd like us to check out? Feel free to mention or put in the chat. I'm also going to launch a brief poll that just helps me to know, did we meet the needs of our audience? Tracy, I see you out there. No pressure to speak, but I recognize that this may be your first or so Dean Talks, so welcome. Feel free to engage. Thanks for coming.
This is great.
Awesome. Good. Okay, so let's see. So I want to let you all know that next month we're going to do IEP and curriculum development. And we'll have we have a program director, we have an administrator who was once a teacher, and who knows who else as the month goes along. Sometimes we have some other goodies to show up. Feel free, please come out and join, tell a friend. I'll put links in the chat how you can find out more about what we're working on with Right Fruit and our lessons that we're creating. And we actually are doing something called that is around emotional transparency, something we touched on today that will allow us to give people the ability to identify what emotions they're feeling and express them in a discreet way. So that's some work we're excited about. Please feel free to reach out if you think that may be interesting. I pasted that link twice. So thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. I hope this all informs and you go off and have a great month. Feel free to reach out. I'm going to hang on the line in case anyone has any other chats or anything that they'd like to talk about. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.